The monopolist has the same cost curves that we studied in the cost chapter. So we're going to have quantity on this axis and the costs and the price on this axis. We can have average total cost. We can have marginal cost, and we'll just stick with those two. There still would be a fixed cost and an average variable cost, but at this point we'll just look at marginal cost and average total cost. And then instead of having in perfect competition, we would just have the price coming in from the market as a horizontal line. In this case, the monopolist faces the entire downward sloping demand curve. And as I described a moment ago, marginal revenue is going to be below, which this in effect is the average revenue curve. So marginal revenue is going to be below the demand curve. And just like in perfect competition, and all the market structures we're going to study, the monopolist is going to maximize profit by picking the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So the quantity that the monopolist is going to want to pick is the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, in perfect competition, marginal cost also, or marginal revenue also equaled price. But in this case, the price is going to be up here. We always price off the demand curve. Every market structure, we're going to price off the demand curve because that's the willingness to pay. So the monopolist is going to pick the quantity based on where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, go up to the demand curve to discover the price, and then we go straight down from there to average total cost, and this becomes the monopolist's profit. So we see a marginal revenue curve below the demand curve. We pick the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We go up to the demand curve to find the price, then back down to average total cost, and lo and behold, the monopolist has a profit. And unlike in perfect competition, where a profit is going to create an incentive for other firms to enter the market and shift the supply curve and drive down the price and eliminate the profit, the monopolist has some barrier to entry. That's why we're a monopoly. We have some barrier to entry, and so other firms are not able to enter, and this becomes a stable situation where the monopolist is able to obtain a profit going forward. So what's the problem with monopoly? The problem with monopoly is that by restricting quantity and raising price, the monopolist is gaining excess resources for itself at the expense of consumers and at the expense of society. So we're just going to use a very simplistic example to illustrate this idea. We're just going to assume a cost structure where there's zero fixed cost. That's a very fictitious assumption. Zero fixed cost and constant marginal cost, which means that marginal cost is going to equal average total cost. And of course, with perfect competition, we know that the market is going to lead to a situation where price is going to equal marginal cost. And so in the market, we're going to end up with this quantity that's going to be produced by all of the many firms in the market. And it'll be at the price where marginal cost equals price. And consumers are going to enjoy this much consumer surplus. And so, in effect, there'll be no producer surplus because price is going to equal cost. Now remember, no profit for the firm is still zero economic profit, meaning that the firms are getting a fair return on capital and on the owner's time. So don't necessarily be concerned. This is an efficient outcome, as we discussed. No wasted resources, and we've maximized total benefit to society. The monopolist, on the other hand, as we know, sees a marginal revenue curve that is different than the demand curve, and is going to end up picking a quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and it is going to go up here, and we're going to price up here, and consumer surplus is reduced to this little triangle. and then this entire area becomes the monopolist's profit. And unfortunately for society, because we have a reduction in quantity, right? The quantity over here would be the quantity that would be efficient. Because we're reducing our quantity, we're raising our price, we also end up with a deadweight loss. And the deadweight loss is this triangle. The difference between the quantity that we would produce under perfect competition, that's the quantity where price equals marginal cost. So the quantity has been reduced, the price has been raised, consumer surplus has shrunk from this big triangle to this little triangle. The monopolist has picked up some of that consumer surplus for his own profit, but some of that reduction in quantity also leads to a deadweight loss. There are mutually beneficial transactions that are not happening because the monopolist has deliberately restricted quantity in order to raise price. There are folks that are willing to pay more for the good than the marginal cost of producing additional quantities of the good. We say these are mutually beneficial transactions that are not being able to happen, and it is a loss to society. Because of this, there are a number of government policies that attempt to restrict or reduce monopolies. It's actually illegal to deliberately create a monopoly. When firms try to merge, the government often intervenes. But sometimes when there's a natural monopoly, when the high fixed costs and electricity generation is a great example of that. There's a huge fixed cost, particularly in the wires and the poles, and so the government doesn't unnecessarily allow the electric company to charge as much as it would like, but in fact it will have a price regulation that will reduce the price to the point, hopefully where the price equals average revenue, so that firms can continue to operate, but don't necessarily make excess profits. At least that's the goal of the price regulation of the electricity industry. The final topic that we're going to discuss in the monopoly section is price discrimination. So, as I mentioned, when the monopolist tries to, or lowers its price in order to increase quantity, there's a price effect and a quantity effect, where the price effect is taking money away from the monopolist as it's charging a lower price for the consumers that would have bought anyway. But wouldn't it be great if we could figure out a way to get more customers, even those that are willing to pay a lower price, without losing the high price that we're getting from the customers that have a higher willingness to pay? Firms try to figure out how to do this all the time. Classic example is the airlines that will charge business travelers more than vacationers. If you've ever gone to the movies, you might see that they have different prices depending on age. Children under 12 may have one ticket price. People over 65 may have a different ticket price. And the idea is that the firms have decided that there's a different willingness to pay for these different characteristics of customers. And what they're doing is they're lowering the price for some customers, trying to pick up more revenue from them without necessarily losing the revenue from the higher price. So graphically we could see it as this way. We could, if we have this price and this quantity, and we have this total revenue, and then we can also figure out how to charge, that we have all these people who have a willingness to pay less than our price. Can we pick up some of that business without lowering the price for these folks? And so if we can say these are the people who are, say, between the ages of 25 and 65, and we say, okay, seniors have a lower willingness to pay, so we're going to have a senior citizen discount at a lower price. We can pick up those senior citizens, but yet still charge the higher price for the folks who are of the prime age group and who have the highest willingness to pay for this particular good or service. So in that case, there would only be the quantity effect. We're not going to lose anything from these customers, and we're just going to add this particular revenue. In fact, if we could charge every single person their willingness to pay, there would, let's say this was the marginal cost from the example that we had before of a constant marginal cost. If we could charge every single person their willingness to pay, we would actually end up back at the efficient quantity. There would be no deadweight loss, but there would also be no consumer surplus. Right? Every single person is paying exactly their willingness to pay. Consumer surplus is the difference between willingness to pay and price. If we could charge every single person exactly their willingness to pay, the monopolist would get all of the profit. We'd maximize the profit for the monopolist, and there would be no consumer surplus. But there also would be no deadweight loss, no mutually beneficial transactions going unexploited. Every single person is buying exactly what they want at exactly the price they're willing to pay. The monopolist is getting maximum profit. And remember, monopolist is part of society, so society actually isn't losing anything. It's just that the monopolist is getting all of the resources. So price discrimination is a way that companies can increase profits, but it has the benefit to society of having an increase in production. If the airlines, for example, weren't allowed to price discriminate, they might just charge that high business person price for everybody, and then fewer people would be able to afford to be able to go on vacation. Because of the fact that the airlines are able to have some differentiation in the way they price their goods, they sell more tickets, people take more flights, and the airlines make more profits. Well, thank you for watching this video. There also are slides that have been posted with a little bit more detail, and of course you really should read the book. And certainly feel free to email me with any questions you might have. This is a very interesting topic. This was a very brief overview of some of the concepts in monopoly, and I look forward to speaking with you more in person when I get back from Washington and we have class again on Thursday evening, the day after Halloween on November 1st. Have a great week.